Hello, everybody. My name is Reagan Archibald, and the reason I do these videos and the reason we have this show is because a lot of people are unhealthy, and I don't want you to be one of them. I'm the founder of East West Health, which is an age reversal company that allows you to become unreasonably healthy in the shortest amount of time without sacrificing the most enjoyable parts of life. Your time is your most valuable resource that you have, and so I want to give you easy ways to stay healthy so that you make your next decade your best decade. And by the way, if you enjoy the show, please leave us a review and we will love you forever. And please enjoy the show.
All right. Welcome everybody to the Unreasonable Health Podcast. This is your host of the day, Cade Archibald, and I am excited to be here with Reagan Archibald, the founder, creator of the Accelerate Wellness programs, East West Health and Go Wellness. Reagan, how's it going this morning?
It's going awesome.
Great. Well, we had a really cool Health Accelerator challenge where we were going through each of the different organ systems of and how development happens in the womb, and then how the aging process happens. That was a really interesting conversation.
I think it's interesting thinking of, just like what developed first. Well, it's your heart and your nerve cells and then your liver kicks in. And so you can kind of see the priorities in the body. By looking at the priorities, then you can say, well, what is it that ages the quickest? And it's kind of interesting when you look at it in reverse, but the number one killer in our country is still heart disease, but that's also the first organ to fully form in the body. So it's like, man, we need to protect that thing because it's been around. We need it in the beginning and we need it in the end.
Yeah, it's critical for all functions. So no, I thought it was really, really intriguing. So if you guys didn't listen to the last podcast, hop in there. It's a really cool one. And then, so we got a peptide of the week. So we're going to talk a little bit about the peptide of the week. What is the peptide of the week, Reagan?
Peptide of the week is one of my favorite peptides. Actually, I had a lot of my favorite, but it's LL37. And so right now we're coming into possibly spring.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. Fingers crossed up here in northern Utah and other places. I just came from Plano, Texas, and it was definitely spring. It was green. It was about 70 degrees. It was perfect. And so as spring comes, one of the things that you want to focus on is getting rid of any toxic accumulation in your body. And what happens over the winter is a lot of us naturally, and this is, there's no harm in this really, but a lot of us go into hibernation mode and we have different activities and we don't have the same sun exposure. We don't get outside as much. And so most people tend to put on 5 pounds. And then now is the time you want to start taking that little extra weight off if you put a little extra on, because our bodies do tend to go into more storage mode when we're in the extreme of winter. So LL37, what can happen is we're going into storage mode is we can develop pathogens. And so LL37 is really good for eradicating any kind of microbial overgrowth. So if you've got bacteria that's not helpful or supportive, it will eradicate that selectively and it won't disrupt the other healthy bacteria. If you've got yeast that's overgrown, if you crave sugar, then you know what I'm talking about with the yeast, and it will help selectively target the yeast and eradicate it. But LL37 in some of the clinical trials, what it's reported to do is also break up scar tissue. And there's actually studies that show LL37 being put on burn wounds. So it's one of my favorite peptides, and it's probably one of the biggest antimicrobial peptides that we have. It's only made by humans. And not only does it help with bacteria, but viruses, fungi. It's got anti-inflammatory properties. It modulates the immune system by suppressing excessive inflammation. And What else, Kate? I mean, it's just it
Yeah, I
breaks up
think
biofilms.
if you're
That's
looking at, if you got a chronic infection and you're looking at antibiotics or LL37, I think LL37 would be a pretty rad peptide to kind of replace that.
Yeah. And some of the research, there's a company out of Canada that was, awarded $50 million to study this against antibiotic resistant infections. But some of the ongoing research in multiple countries, they're looking at it for MRSA, for tuberculosis. It's a treatment for HIV patients, a wound healing, which I mentioned earlier, but one of the biggest ones is cystic fibrosis. And so we've got one of our clients who's got cystic fibrosis. He's been on this and seems to be helping, but that's a big one. And then cancer. It does seem to have anti-cancer effects in some of the preclinical trials. And what it does is it more selectively targets the cancer cells versus the natural cells in your body, and so it also helps modulate the immune response to cancer. So I think this could be huge. The two cancers that I know of that they're studying it for is breast cancer, and then also they're looking at lung cancer, and then also for rheumatoid arthritis. So because it's immunomodulatory, and by remodulating the immune system, that means your immune system, if it's hypervigilant, it helps calm it down. If it's too low, then it helps bring it up. So LL37, I think, as far as a peptide of the day, I think that one is, you can't argue that there's a lot of benefits to it.
Yeah, great peptide. All right.
And the one more thing on it. Sorry, it's coming to my memory. Sorry, guys. It took a minute in the beginning. I was like, I know there's more, but it actually is. If you think of stem cells, when stem cells come into the body, the first antimicrobial peptide that goes in and eradicates any infections is LL37. So a lot of times when we're doing regenerative medicine, we're working on your knees or whatever, you want to get rid of that infection in the joint, and LL37 seems to have some pretty good potency, and it's a natural secretome from mesenchymal stem cells in your body.
Nice. Oh, that's really cool. So everybody, peptide of the day, of the week, LL37. So if you haven't tried some, give us a call. Check it out. All right. And just want to reinforce, if you're not part of the Health Accelerator community out there, make sure you jump onto our hack. We do weekly community sessions similar to what you just learned on the peptide of the week. But go to acueastwest.com/hack. That's HAC. And you can register for that. It's a really, really fun community. All right. Well, let's jump into today's topic, Reagan. We're going to be kind of continuing on the last thread, but excited to jump in.
So today, what we're going to be talking about is we're going to keep going into looking at all the different organ systems and the aging of those organ systems. And so I just had a full CAT scan done of my entire body, and it was really interesting being there and seeing everything that's going on under the hood. I'll share my screen with you and give HIPAA permission. But the way that this technique's done is, and this was in Plano at Advanced Body Scan, and these are great collaborators of us. We're hosting these longevity retreats. And so part of what we do is, in focusing on our core philosophies, is number one, we want to make your next 10 years your healthiest 10 years. And I don't know about you, Cade, but if you have something like a heart attack, or if you have a cancer going on in your body and you don't get rid of that preemptively and you don't detect it preemptively, the longer things go on in the body, the worse they typically get. It's not like, well, even though I had the scan now, I'm just going to wait a year and then it's going to be better. It's like, no, you want to get on it as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Our second philosophy is when health improves, everything improves. And so you'll notice that by making these subtle changes, so we ran the functional blood chemistry on everybody. We're doing the Gallery test, which can detect any kind of cancerous activities about 4 years before typical scans, and it does seem to be pretty accurate. And so these are all really important predictive and preventative measures that you can take to really see what's going on. The third philosophy that we have is no death by neglect. And so this is a really important thing, is now that you know that these advanced diagnostics exist, why not have them done? So I'm going to show you mine today. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how you can start looking at your body completely different and actually how to be more proactive so that you can live with unreasonable health to an unreasonably old age, and you'll have disproportionately more health than you would otherwise. So one of the things that I did is I jumped into a full body CAT scan. And what this CAT scan does, this was non-contrast. It literally took 4 minutes. So Kate, if you imagine there's a big round circle and you're on a table and the tray just kind of brings you back and forth. So it's like, and so it's doing slices. So it's doing horizontal slices as if you're slicing my body in half, and then it crisscrosses the other way. So the amount of imaging that happens, it's literally looking at every centimeter of your body. And so you can look at the calcium scores, you look at all of the blockage in the arteries, you can see if there's any cysts, you can see the size of the organs, and it's pretty interesting. So as we kind of look at my lungs and airways, there's no suspicious nodules, nothing in the lungs, so that was positive. No pneumothorax, no thickening, no calcification of the pleura. So good, lungs look good. Heart,
well done.
Heart mediastatinum. So this looked at my thyroid. One of the things that we notice is, as Dr. Sparks and I were going through it, it's better. This is kind of like a static radiology report, but it's really interesting as you start seeing, as you go through the slices, you can see the size. And so my thyroid is smaller than normal, which he called out when we had our one-on-one conversation. And we related that back to the fact that I've had Hashimoto's, and so there's a little tiny little tiny lymph node that's a little bit pathological possibly, but otherwise looked pretty good, which was really positive. Heart's normal size, no pericardial effusion, thoracic aorta, those look good, no calcifications. Esophagus looks good for my age. So all look good. I get my calcium score was 0. So not that, and that's where you want it to be. It's positive that way. So you want, it was negative for calcium, which is a positive finding. Only in medicine do we have where we get really excited when there's a positive finding. It's like, it's like, all right, Kate, you tested positive for elevated blood sugar. Now we can treat it. It should be you tested negative because it's not good. Well,
when you
only in medicine is it reversed.
When everything comes back normal, it's kind of dry.
Yeah, they like it to be positive, which we want it to be negative, as a patient. But the bones and soft tissue, this was pretty interesting because there were mild degenerative changes in my thoracic spine. And then you can see where I've had a compression fracture in T12. And so he was like, what'd you do? Because, you could see where there's like a big notch taken out of that. And that was from a snowboarding accident. We treated it. We've done regen medicine on it. And it's been years and it's super stable. It used to bother me. I'd feel it at night in bed and it would just really bug me. I wish they could have shown my thoracic spine, but the imaging didn't go up that high. But yeah, so it's fun to see the different, kind of old injuries, fun, interesting, I should say. Cade, that's where I said, you need to get this scan done. Steve will take you right through when you go to Plano. Yeah, so no nodules, liver normal size. You can see all the adrenal glands, spleen, kidneys, no stones, pelvic organs, GI. Needed to, this was traveling and needed a coffee enema there, apparently. Peritoneum looks good. Lymph nodes look good. Blood vessels, no significant systemic vascular calcification. So that's awesome. But then they did find what we found also. And as Dr. Sparks and I were going through this, we found that there is some mild degeneration in this facet joints in my spine. And so, Kate, we were lifting heavy things at a young age. So maybe there's some of that, but there's a lot of abuse that's gone on my low back.
Yeah.
But I also had a small disc bulge at L5S1, but then as we looked closer, I've got the same thing in L4, L5. And so the beautiful thing about finding this now, where I don't really have any symptoms, sometimes my low back will bother me, but now I can actually do something about it. So I came back and I told Amy, I said, hey, let's get some work going on me. So I got to work on, I've got some mild diverticulosis in my sigmoid colon, which was a shock. So I'm getting back on the repair diet. I've been doing a lot of great things for it, but and then that mild degeneration of my lumbar spine. So that's what I discovered. And these are things that I wouldn't have known if I didn't do that test. And so yeah, this is interesting, and I think something that everyone can do. So now I know I can take action. I am back on. I'm going to start the CellCore, the 4-step process on CellCore. Start that up again. Get the repair bite going for the gut, and then retest in about a year. And then I'm going to get my LL37 going. That's one of the reasons I had that as the peptide of the day, because I'm ramping up my LL37. And then for my spine, Amy, I was already like, all right, make sure as soon as her schedule permits and mine, then I'm getting my back treated right at L4, L5, L5S1. So we'll do regen medicine there, do the perinatal tissue allograft, get the stem cells going. And I'm really excited to be able to do that before there's any issues that show up. So all in all, the positive findings were really positive for me, because now I can take action on those.
Love it. No, and I think that's so critical to look at that in the future, or look at where you're at right now and actually be able to prevent symptoms arriving. Because typically, we don't really start looking at things, especially pain wise and joint health wise, until it kind of starts hurting or you start noticing things. And so I think that's awesome. Yeah, I got to go check out, especially my spine, my low back. I'm similar to you, where every once in a while I'll get, especially if I drive in the car too long, I'll start getting a little bit of low back pain. And yeah, I'm sure there's some stuff going on down there. Got to get it taken care of.
Yeah, well, you'll be able to see your T5 where you had, was it T5 where you had your motor
I think it's T7.
T7, yeah. Yes. Interesting to see what that looks like. So for those of you who are looking at that, you say, all right, well, that's the hardware. So think of that as like you have your computer and you have the hardware, but then we look at the software, and the software, in my opinion, is it's critical, because now you can do something about it. And that's the beautiful thing about having the test done, is now that there's a heightened awareness of where I need to focus in my body, and I have my labs, I'm doing my blood labs all the time, and that's the software. And so let's I'll pull up a lab here, because this is what else we run at the events. Go ahead, Kate.
I was just going to say, I really like that concept where you got the hardware that's looking at all the meat and bones in the body. And then the software is all the communication patterns, the blood and the fluidity of it all. I think I love that.
Yeah,
So you got
it's so
the
powerful.
hardware and software of the body.
Yep. So this is the software. So these are all the things going on internally. And Allison, good to have you on, Allison. When do you think the Utah will have that kind of scanning device? We are working with advanced imaging out of Texas. They're in Texas and Oklahoma City. Their newest facility will be in La Jolla in California. And then in Utah, we actually had Steve Marler, the owner of Advanced Imaging. He's a client of ours at Go Wellness, and his cardiologist has been out for one of our retreats, and I'm working with him and their radiologist in reading labs and doing peptide therapy. But we plan on getting one out here very soon, but the big problem is it's getting the machinery in, the MRI, the CAT scan. It's probably about 2 years out, it would be my guess, but it's on the docket. But there's La Jolla will be it's a really short flight, and it's a long drive, but it's still drivable. But those are a couple options. I'll let you guys know as soon as that's available, and we'll be hosting a retreat. We're doing a lot of collaborations with Steve, so we'll be hosting a retreat in La Jolla with Steve and Mike Koenigs, hopefully very soon. So that'll be fun. All right, so let's look at the software side of things. So if you think about that, if I look at, okay, what are the age of my body based on that scan? The scan doesn't say, oh, your age is, this, but one of the things that you can do is you can start looking at different markers. And so this is an Avexia blood test. And so you can see all these markers here. But one of the big ways that you can predict the health of your organ is get a scan. And you could see my thyroid's a little smaller. So we'd say my thyroid is aged faster than the rest of my body. But based on what it's been through, I was really optimistic because every year I'm doing IVs and I'm regenerating it. I'm doing peptides to activate it. Keeping my health in line. You look at the size of the kidneys, you look at the size of the heart, you look at the overall size of the lungs, the pancreas. I mean, as we're going through my organ systems, I had Dr. Sparks stop so that we could actually make sure that everything looks super healthy. So now I say, okay, my hardware looks good. Now let's look at the software. And that means, what are these organ systems? What's their product? How are they producing based on what shows up in the blood? Because it's all these organs together is what makes the properties in the blood. So if you look at your kidney, for example, and if you wanted to age your kidneys, you'd want to look at uric acid, creatinine, blood urea nitrogen, and which are all on this. There's cardiovascular markers, there's liver, there's skin, there's gut, and there's immune markers. And so I'll show a study that I referenced last night so you guys can see what the research shows on predicting the age of different organ systems. So here's where, if you're looking at the age of the kidney systems, so I would look at my kidney scan and I would say, well, good, my kidneys fortunately look pretty darn healthy. You can see there's really good aortic blood flow from the aorta into the renal arteries, and then the kidneys, there's not a lot of black matter. There seems to be good glomerular filtration, and so that would go in line with my kidney function test from blood work. So you want to look at not just serum uric acid, but creatinine, blood urea nitrogen, and GFR. Cardiovascular wise, Cade, you were mentioning yours today, like your blood lipids were a little higher than what you want them to be. So then we'd say, okay, well, cardiovascularly, this would be helpful on a scan, because then you can say the hardware looks good. Now let's make sure that the software is updated so that the hardware doesn't start getting impacted.
For sure.
But what surprised you the most out of it?
Out of my lipids?
Yeah.
Yeah, they just really surprised at how elevated they were. And I think, that I'd been like really strict carnivore for about all of last year, and then really kind of started allowing myself to access probably a little too much sugar, and yeah, got off of that and just kind of went back to, you know, whatever's around I eat. And so yeah, just really created some realization and motivation that it's not as, you know, I think our bodies get less and less forgiving over time as well. So, you know, it used to be I could cheat quite a bit and get away with it. Now that bandwidth is a lot thinner on the cheating side as you age. And so just being a little more disciplined and figuring out what are some better habits I can get in place to make it to get those in a better spot. So yeah, that elevated lipids and LDL, I was like, oh man, that is not good.
Yeah, and it's also, it's like it's a good reminder, because as we're younger, we have more margin of error. Just like, you know, a 3-year-old falls down the stairs and they get to the bottom of the stairs and they may cry because they're, you know, they're scared or they frightened them, and then they'll go jump up and go play somewhere. You know, 80-year-old falls down the stairs, and sometimes it's the last step that they ever take, and in the majority of cases. So it's no different than you know, the foods that we eat. And if you're sedentary, that it's doubly expensive being sedentary in your 60s than it was in your 30s. Like in your 30s, you can kind of get by with it a little bit. We're not recommending that, by the way, if you're in your 30s. But when you're in your 60s, your 50s, your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, you'll die really fast. You'll get recycled pretty quick, because you're sending a signal to the universe that you're ready to pack up camp and go home. And so it will speed up the process, guaranteed.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, cardiovascular. So in these, you know, they looked at, you know, there's basically over 400 features that they're looking at. And if you guys want to have a kind of an interesting snapshot of how to test aging with more detail than anyone else is doing, look at Brian Johnson. His YouTube channel is phenomenal, because man, the stuff he does, he's Provo, he's from Provo. I don't know where he lives now, but he's got over 30 doctors working with him, and he's been obsessed with reversing his age. And he's my age, and he probably looks 20 years younger. I mean, he looks great. But yeah, it's interesting, because he helped me dial in some of these metrics, and then I started doing some of the research that he and his team were doing based on his references. And so we're getting closer to being able to identify the age of each organ system. So then you can say, well, Kate, if your blood lipids are elevated, then we need to work on the cardiovascular function. And then the very first thing you need to do is make sure there's no big threats there, and go get your scan done. Right. So look at the hardware, and that gives you kind of a stagnant snapshot, but it's something that's important to do every year. And then let's work on the software. And then every year we can go back and you get a report card on the hardware. So,
I like it.
yeah, and there's no one better than Steve and his team, even Peter Diamandis, Tony Robbins, they're you know, Fountain Life groups. They're looking to Steve Marler as being the solution for you know, helping even with their imaging and centers. So so there's a lot going on here. We're at the epicenter of this age reversal medicine, and it's fun to be a part of it. But in your liver, you want to look at bilirubin, you want to look at ALT, AST. These are the most important markers for your liver. You could even throw in GGT. In the hormone category, looking at all your androgen hormones, your testosterone, free testosterone, your progesterone, even looking at the 18-hydroxy progesterone is really important as well. And then with the skin, you can do facial images. And what's really interesting is there are facial recognition images that will actually predict your age and they can do it within a 3-year variance. So that's really important. And to see the external side of things, because Kay, do you remember what system ages the fastest in our body from our discussion last night?
Isn't it the first one is the skin?
That's it.
Yeah. You
Skin.
get the most, that's like our outer protective shell. And so that's getting the most beating. It makes sense to me. It's like you're out in the sun, it's getting beat up, you get weird toxins, all the environmental exposures. It's like protecting the insides from everything else. And so, yeah, it's going to get beat up pretty bad.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And so, in this particular study, that's what they found. They found that, there's 2,000 participants in this, and they were 18 to 100 years old. And they evaluated all the 10 major organ systems, the skin. We don't think of the skin as an organ system, but it's massive. Your skin, your hair, your nails. They looked at the urinary system, the GI system, all the major systems. They looked at the respiratory system, seeing if there's any kind of decrease there, and they came up with different tests and imaging to predict the age of these systems. And they found that there's, in the sequence of aging, it's our skin that goes first, and then our musculoskeletal system. That's number 2. Number 3 is the cardiovascular system. Number 4 is the respiratory system. That's your lungs, your airways. Number 5 is the brain and the nerves. Number 6 is the hormones, the endocrine system. And then number 7 is the immune system. But in this study, they found that these are the major systems that start to go. And even in the skin, you lose elasticity, you have increased wrinkles, you have increase in what are known as age spots. And that's where I love our GHK copper. You can use the GHK copper cream. You can use the Skin Vitale, which is the line that we carry now that's got the hyaluronic acid and the GHK copper in it. It's phenomenal. But they also looked at scans, and they could actually see, just like I did my scan, you can see with these CT tests just how much volume you've got in each of the organ systems. And then they took it to the next level on the muscles. They looked at muscle strength tests. They looked at bone mineral density. They looked at x-rays to evaluate the joint health. So my low back, I've got that mild degeneration there, a couple mild bulges. It's like, okay, my low back's a little older than the rest of my spine. My T12, luckily I've had treatments there, because he said, this looks really stable for having an injury this severe. And I said, that's right, we do the right treatments. But now I can treat my low back, and I'm going to reverse that. The other thing they did is in the study is they did MRIs of all of the organ systems as well. So they went beyond just a CAT scan, and they did MRI. For the immune system, they looked at all the lymph nodes. And so I have some lymph nodes by my thyroid that, maybe make my thyroid a little older, along with my thyroid being smaller. So, kind of interesting as you dive into these and you start looking at all of the capabilities. So that's kind of everything on that on the left side of the screen. On the right side, we've got the immune cells. So they're looking at T cells and the receptors. We talked about the physical fitness, but the other thing they did is stool testing. And that's pretty interesting, because right now it's fall, or it's spring, almost spring. And so it's a really good time to get your stool analysis going. And then they looked at metabolomics. And so 2 tests that we have in every single program in people that we work with is, we want to understand what your gut looks like. We want to understand the metabolomics. And so one of the reasons in our longevity optimization programs, and even in our Accelerate Wellness programs, is we look at these particular markers in metabolomics and in gut, and that helps us predict where the interferences are that will keep you from having unreasonable health. And then genetics. So, Kid, what are your thoughts on genetics as far as predicting aging in genetics?
I think genetics and some of the testing, when it originally came out, my thought process was like, okay, yeah, it seems cool to understand your genetics, but it's also a little defeating because it's like, well, what can we do about it if it's just our genetics? But as I've learned more and studied more, like the epigenetics component of it is so cool, because you can, looking at genetics, we can see what you're predisposed to. You can also see some of the underlying causes of, certain symptoms that someone's experiencing. And then from there, there's actually different ways to kind of hack the body to get around some of those genes and actually promote, health, and turn off that switch that gene kind of flips on. So I think there's so many cool things with genetics, especially from a predisposition standpoint and aging, as you can really help create a better roadmap on that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, that's what they found in the studies is there's so many things because genetically, like if you've got MTHFR, then, all right, well, I need to support the homocysteine levels so that they're not getting too elevated, causing high levels of inflammation in my body. And so it's just fascinating. And I think, just to kind of summarize everything today, if you can look at your body, multifaceted, and yes, we don't want, nothing is independent. It's not like your gut is independent from your liver and your heart's not independent from your brain.
Oh yeah.
Everything's super connected. But the benefits of separating systems out, it gives you an understanding of what to focus on first and what the priorities are. And then you can really start unblocking a lot of those interferences and start living your best life and start feeling amazing. So I'm excited about what's coming up in our longevity optimization programs. We're putting in a lot of these new, more nuanced tests. And one of the immune tests that we're doing along with the blood test is the Gallery. And the Gallery is that really critical test that will show the DNA unraveling in cancer. And so luckily, every test that we've ran, everyone's come back negative. And we just want to keep it that way. But at least we know that we're being proactive and doing what's necessary. So so many exciting things. But hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And I'm going to give you guys a nice little challenge to start looking at your body and saying, okay, what part of your body has aged the fastest and which one needs the most support right out of the gates? Maybe that's your brain, because you have a worry muscle that doesn't seem to turn off. And so you've burned out your worry engine. Maybe it's your low back like me. Maybe it's your knees. Maybe it's your gut, whatever it might be. Now is a really good time to take care of that. And so, yeah, I'm excited I can take care of my health on a whole nother level again. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed that.
Love it. All right. Well, everybody, you got a killer challenge. So I really like that. So let's figure out what's aging the fastest and do something about it. Love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Reagan. That was amazing information and content today. Thank you so much. Don't forget Peptide of the Week, LL37. Check it out. Give us a call if you'd like to try that out. If you have any of those symptoms that we talked about prior, or you have, I think everyone typically could use that in one scenario or another. And everybody have an amazing week. We'll see you guys next time.
Bye-bye.